Here on the streets of New York for the making of Exterminator 2, a sequel to the hit film The Exterminator, starring Robert Ginty, Deborah Geffner, and Mario Van Peebles, and directed by Mark Buntsman, who is using more than 400 artists and technicians to create non-stop action movie making. Exterminator 2 marks the return of Johnny Long, the Vietnam veteran who is determined to do something to stop the rampant crime and violence on the city's streets, and to do it in his own way, by delivering a lethal dose of vengeance, Exterminator style. Robert Ginty is back once again as the notorious Exterminator. Movie audiences may wonder how an accomplished Shakespearean actor, who has been both a rock and roll singer and a student at Princeton, as well as a familiar face on a peaceful TV show like The Paper Chase, suddenly becomes the guy with the steel helmet and the black suit, who plays judge and jury with a flamethrower.
I read the material and I saw what I could do with the character. I saw immediately that I could humanize the story. It was a very violent story. It's a very reactionary story. It's a story about a vigilante, and it's both scripts, and certainly the first one, if we want to deal with that question, was brutally violent. I mean, almost unnecessarily so, but I think they were trying to show and prove a point. But what missed is humanizing the character, making him a human being, and giving a reason why someone would do this. I went in another direction, films that inspired me towards it, things like Straw Dogs or John Boyd's performance in Deliverance. I'm a very reluctant man, a man who doesn't like violence at all, but when forced into a situation, then reacts to it violently.
Ginty brings some very human moments to the film in his scenes with Deborah Geffner, who is Caroline. Caroline is Johnny's loving and supportive girlfriend. She's a beautiful dancer struggling for a Broadway career.
I mean, that was beautiful. I love that. Oh, that was wonderful. Look, you're getting a standing ovation here. The crowds are on their feet. It was wonderful. I know this girl right here.
This warmth and compassion is also evident in Ginty's scenes with Frankie Faison, who plays BG, an old friend who offers Johnny a partnership in his garbage collecting business.
We're going to park this thing any way I want to. Hold on.
But the darker side of Johnny Long really comes to life when he finds himself face to face with the evil and ruthless street warrior X, deadly ruler of the dark alleys and deserted subways of the city.
Set fire to the streets. Everything will burn. We'll build it up again. We will control it. Wake up with my brothers.
The striking young actor Mario Van Peebles auditioned for director Mark Buntsman, but failed to get the part he was looking for.
First of all, I auditioned for the character of VG. I went in, I auditioned for VG, and I did my best Garbage Man. I gave him Garbage Man, baby. I watched Garbage Man. I had Garbage Man gloves. And they said, no, you just don't look like the Garbage Man type.
Instead, Mario Van Peebles became X, the gang leader with more lofty ambitions than you find in your average street tough.
I am the streets. If you say so. Just so long as the streets stay in Harlem.
Next, I take over the city.
He's such a presence on film that I didn't want to have him as the Exterminator's buddy and have him interfere with the position that the first lead has. And more important than that, I got the idea that as the villain, as X, he'd be an interesting, different choice to make from the regular street punk.
Sort of said, well, what if we took X out and sort of made him sort of a pseudo-antichrist, made him sort of a rebel with a cause, be it a bent cause, right? So, now this is getting interesting. And I designed the look to be sort of urban road warrior, to have something otherworldish, something old but something new, sort of like a modern gladiator.
Mark Buntsman is making his directorial debut at the helm of Exterminator 2 after serving as producer of the first film in the series. Buntsman's story is a unique one. He never attended film school. He did not spend 10 years on Hollywood's back lots. Yet he had a picture he wanted to make, and he found a way to make it.
It's a project that I was able to put together completely outside the industry, without industry resources and without really knowing a lot of people. Just by working on a concept that worked, that people wanted the product. They didn't necessarily know me from Adam or think that that's what they were hiring. They were hiring the work, and that's kind of what I was proud of.
Damn, that was good.
So the Exterminator is back. But how did he get here? Doesn't common sense tell us that he was demolished at the end of Exterminator Part 1?
They think they shot him. They did not. He was wearing this bulletproof vest very conveniently. And he disappears, still alive. And now we pick him up. And it is 3 years later.
No matter how the Exterminator escaped, he wouldn't be the Exterminator unless we found him once again walking around like a Sherman tank with legs and breathing fire like Godzilla.
Oh, no!
The Exterminator films depend on rapid-fire action, which must be carefully choreographed down to the finest detail. Director Mark Buntsman has developed elaborate floor plans to map out every scene in the film. He must manage his actors both skillfully and realistically so movie audiences will believe what they're seeing. But perhaps his most important job during these weeks of shooting is to make the best use of his huge cast and crew so that the day moves along quickly and efficiently.
Well, the key thing, I think, for an action film is a lot of preparation. You know, if you're rehearsing a scene with an actor and he might miss his mark, he'll be a little bit out of focus and you can do the shot again. It costs you a little time. But if you have a truck spinning on a wet street and it misses his mark and mows over the camera crew, you've got a big mistake on your hands. So it's just an extraordinary amount of detail, and hopefully you have enough time to plan it all out and do it so that it's just chipping off a piece of it each day.
To build the non-stop action sequence in the film when X's band of thugs arrive to put an end to the Exterminator's one-man army, Buntsman is everywhere. He's huddling with his key crew members to review the scene. He makes final preparations for the elaborate stunt work with stunt coordinator Ted Duncan. He stands right next to the cameraman in order to understand exactly how the camera will capture the scene. The scene must be put together in stages. First, a master shot is set up with the cars driving into the warehouse, streaming past a menacing silhouette of the street warrior X. This shot is of primary importance because it communicates the geography of the scene to the audience. Once the audience has its bearings, the rest of the scene will make perfect visual sense. Then Director Buntsman and his crew move in for the particulars, the individual shots which operate like pieces of a puzzle, filling an action scene with its exciting moments. Cars full of gang members arrive in one section of the warehouse. The actors must not only make their cars hit the cameraman's marks, they must also climb out of the cars on cue and keep the action moving. When the director doesn't like the look of the first take, he uses his own energy to coax a performance out of his youthful cast members, to demonstrate to them the kind of feeling he wants them to create. He must be careful not to be overbearing. He doesn't want them to give up their best instincts. He wants to stimulate them to do it their own way.
It's like, you want instructions. Red Rat's in charge here. You know, what's happening? Okay?
Even this small piece of a much larger action scene requires a number of angles which director Buntsman and directors of photography Bob Baldwin and Joseph Mangine want to capture. Then a second closer angle picks up the gang as they quickly bolt out of the car door. The notorious garbage truck, the Exterminator's big lumbering co-star in the film, requires a third camera angle. It will provide a dramatic glimpse of the bad guys as the truck plows toward them. Finally, a high-angle camera is used to show the size of the warehouse, to make it look and feel like a battlefield. In addition to planning the photographic coverage of the scene, the director also must make sure the screen direction and the eye lines are working. In order for the film to cut together properly, each actor must be looking and moving in exactly the right direction. The scene also is the responsibility of weapons armor Danny Kershoff and his crew, who not only prepare the firearms, but they must also show the actors how to handle the kind of weapons they're not likely to find at a local firing range. A bazooka, for example. The bazooka explosions are created by a small black gunpowder bomb detonated by a battery-powered device in the handle of the weapon. The actors are given a full rehearsal with their weapons in order to synchronize their movements. Finally, the scene is shot with the bazookas and the automatic rifles, resulting in a hail of gunfire. The final stage of the battle scene is to prepare the truck for its performance as a battering ram. First, a smoky atmosphere is created for the scene, and then it's off to the races. Explosions are detonated all around the truck. And then the garbage truck is driven by stunt driver Billy and Agnes through a row of cars toward the film camera. When the scene is completed, the crew rushes in with fire extinguishers to douse the flames. It's been a full day for Mark Buntsman and his crew. Now let's finally have a look at how these lengthy preparations come together in the final version of the battle scene in Exterminator 2. In a film like Exterminator 2, chock full of action and special effects, movie audiences tend to take for granted how the actors feel when the script calls for them to strangle someone to death or when they're on the screen carrying guns. For example, in this scene when Exterminator Johnny Long loses his best friend BG in a hail of gunfire. It's actor Mario Van Peebles up there on the screen firing away with an Uzi machine gun and wearing a grin as wide as a Cheshire cat. That's not a feeling many of us experience in our everyday lives, but for the actor to make us believe it, he must feel it himself.
What scared me most about doing the role was not just doing the role, but getting into it and enjoying it. I mean, that gun, the Uzi that I had when I shot BG on the truck, and playing X, there was a sense of power, and it became a part of me, and I did things that I was like, whoa, Mario, that's you. It reminded me of playing football and hitting guys and saying, ugh, this feels good, I like it.
In fact, the camaraderie between Mario and the actors who play the members of his gang was still there long after filming had been completed.
At a club, and got into a fight. And one of the guys from Exterminator was there, the guy that was a roller skater, and immediately responded, just like my right-hand man in X. In Exterminator. I mean, we would go around and would respond to each other like the gang.
For Robert Ginty, the reality of the character he plays is no less personal.
I really have a violent instinct in me. I mean, it'd be very hard to, as a human being, I could never do what I do as an actor. But maybe there's obviously a part of me that is capable of that, and I act it out as an actor.
Though the actors on Exterminator 2 can sometimes reach the boiling point, it's nothing like the feeling on the set when it comes time to perform the extremely dangerous fire stunts. Stunt coordinator Ted Duncan is in charge, and he's one of the best in the business. But this particular fire stunt is one which even Ted Duncan has never attempted before. His job is to have a record 5 men burning in a single scene. He must not only observe traditional safety precautions, but must carefully plan how the 5 men can move freely and dramatically without endangering one another. Exterminator 2's director has tremendous respect for what Ted Duncan brings to a film.
He knows how to draw that very fine line between really being safe and protecting the stuntmen and the other people on the set, and also putting the shot together in a way that really sells it dramatically.
The first step is to shoot Robert Ginty firing the notorious flamethrower high above the set where the stuntmen will be burned. Then there is a rehearsal of the 5 men who will perform the stunt. Under Ted's watchful eye, the guys walk in, and there's a simulation first of the application of the non-flammable gelatin, and then of the flames being ignited. Finally, just like the actors in the film, the stuntmen must rehearse their movements very carefully. They must know precisely where they are going. One mistake, and there could be a serious injury. Now it's for real. To build the scene, a barrel filled with water, which will appear to be gasoline in the film, is slowly lowered over the area where the stuntmen will be burned. And after a final warning by Assistant Director Kelly Van Horn and a final look by Director Mark Buntsman, the stuntmen are costumed in their fireproof asbestos clothing, and every inch of their exposed skin is coated with a clear, non-flammable gelatin. The gelatin must be applied with the utmost care and precision. It is the only thing that protects these men from serious injury. There is no margin for error. One mistake could be fatal. New York firemen and paramedics are standing by just in case something goes wrong. And there is one final concern which Ted Duncan must leave to his stuntmen.
While you're breathing, you're going to hold your breath, get into the wind, and take your breath, and then let it out while the fire is blowing away from you. If you turn and it whips around in front of you and you get a face full of fire, then you got it in your lungs and it sears the lungs.
Finally, the torches are ignited. And as the entire crew holds their breath, Ted Duncan gives the signal to light the bodies. The men are on fire. A cue is quickly given to an operator of the high-speed camera, which will give the scene a devastating slow-motion effect. The men begin to stagger, careful not to collide into one another, searching for their prearranged destinations where the flames are extinguished. The stunt has been a success, and nobody is more relieved than stunt coordinator Ted Duncan.
We all had nice timing. Nobody else was. Everybody stayed in camera. Thank God.
Director Mark Buntsman may have had a few anxious moments himself, but he also is very pleased at the result.
They stayed out here for a real long time, played to all the cameras.
You've just seen how one of Hollywood's most dangerous stunts is done. Now, let's have a look at how it appears in the final version of Exterminator 2.